Good. Good.
Okay. All right. I'm Ryan Brown, and this is the Unvarnished Podcast, and I am at the Lime Academy for the second time to talk to Chad Fisher, who has been hired within the last few months. How long has it been?
4 or 5 months.
4 or 5 months as the new sculpture director of the Lime Academy of Fine Art in Old Lyme, Connecticut. I was here last year just talking about the relaunch of the school, and I know even early on they were talking about having a sculpture program, so it's exciting that they were able to pull that together so quickly. And so the incoming students coming in just the second year have that access to that program. So I know when I went to Florence, they had the sculpture program, and having the two combined was just such a huge benefit for student understanding, student learning. So this is the first time I've met you.
Correct.
So
Yes.
I know I've kind of looked up your story a little bit, but I'd love to hear, your story from, how you got into sculpture, and then, leading up to, I know your family started a foundry, is that
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So, into that, and then how it came about that you got here.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So I was born in 1983 and in Woodbury, New Jersey, so it's just outside of Philadelphia.
Okay.
My dad is a trained illustrator. He trained under Ben and Jane Eisenstadt. So
Okay.
going back, those were considered sort of part of that lineage of the golden age of illustration. So they were Society of Illustrator members and things of that nature. So art I have one sibling. Art for my brother and I, it was just part of our childhood.
Yeah.
So we drew a lot. And we went to wood carving classes with my dad. The arts were just always around. My dad also studied carpentry and things of that nature. Mom was supportive, but my dad was really the spearhead within the family pushing the arts.
Yeah.
So I had visited Brandywine more than I could count by the time I was 10 or 12. So
Wow.
yeah, a lot of painting and a lot of drawing. So I wanted to be, by the time I was 15 or 16, J.C. Leindecker.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
He was immediately my favorite. I studied illustration as well.
Okay.
And when I was in college, we were able to go out to the Brandywine Museum,
Nice.
Delaware Museum, and see a lot of it in person for the first time. Unbelievable. And immediately J.C. Leindecker was the guy, right?
Yeah. Just a remarkable fluidity and finesse with all of the materials.
Yeah.
So much freedom and a real interest in design, which it sort of verged on that Art Deco, but at the same time unique. He really had a unique approach. So my freshman year in college was at Syracuse University.
Okay.
So I went there to paint. Mary Tinkelman, a Society of Illustrators member, was up there. Robert Dacey was up there, both society guys. So I went up there to study with them. It was great. I just wanted something a little bit more intense.
Yeah.
So I left Syracuse, and then so I'm 19, and I go to the Pennsylvania Academy then. So my dad, again, is this guiding light during this time period, and says, why don't you check out PAFA? So I head down to the Pennsylvania Academy. I enroll. I'm beyond thrilled with the core program that they had, or the introductory program.
What year would that have been?
2001 and 2.
Okay.
I take a sculpture course with John Horn, just a basic portrait course, and I just loved the feeling of clay.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely loved it. The sculpture program was going through a transitional phase at that time period, but they still had, faculty shows and members that you could still see their work. And that's the first time I saw Gary Weissman's work, who would eventually become my mentor and a very dear friend of mine. His wife, Tracy Ziegler, who's a sculptor and a painter, and Gary Weissman, I would say is the best figurative sculptor currently living, was at the Pennsylvania Academy. So I began to just take courses as often as I could, just all sculpture based. I was studying at the University of Pennsylvania because PAFA had a collaborative program with them.
Okay.
So I was taking courses there, and then I was also taking courses at the Schuylkill Academy, which was a small atelier that broke off from Pennsylvania Academy, and Stuart Feldman was there. So I was studying sculpture as often as I could. Gary had invited me up to his home studio / foundry, upstate New York, and besides just being an incredible instructor, and he was just a really great person, someone who not only taught me about sculpture but about life.
Yeah.
Which is, this is enjoy the journey, and how the clay is sort of a microcosm for the macrocosm of your life journey.
Yeah.
So it goes way beyond about getting things right, and more about finding the awesomeness,
Yeah.
of sculpture. So, following graduation from PAFA, Gary suggested I study with Myron Barnstone. He's considered like the golden section guy, dynamic symmetry, composition, basic introductory drawing classes. Studied with him for a couple years, and then I was down in Ringling School of Design in Sarasota. I was studying with George Pratt through the Illustration Academy. I wanted more composition.
Yeah.
Really cared about. Once I started going down the rabbit hole of dynamic symmetry, it was just like, all right, how far can I take this?
And all this while, you're still thinking how this applies to sculpture, to three dimensions.
Yes. Yeah. So Myron would sort of translate that. Gary, I'm still going up to Gary's a few times a year, at least once a month during some time periods. Doing whatever I can just to be around him.
Yeah.
And so I go there. I bounce around for a little bit. And then I met Stephen Perkins. Stephen Perkins and Gary Weissman studied with Leslie Posey. So I believe in lineage.
Yeah.
A great deal. I believe, talent is overrated, and this is pretty much hard work, repetition,
Yeah.
and lineage. Is the information real, or is it some sort of made-up nonsense that someone came up with?
Yeah.
So
That's so interesting. I've talked about that, for a really long time, because I experienced a, kind of haphazard, university education that was a lot of opinion, not a lot of structure, chaotic in terms of how it was presented, as a blind sort of naive young student trying to understand that and puzzle it together and organize it out of the chaos. It was impossible. And then going to the Florence Academy and having that presented in such an understandable way was the only reason I'm still doing it. It's the only way I could have learned and put this together. And a lot of that has to do with how the information is passed on and digested and organized. That organization of information is just so massively important, and I think it comes from that lineage of teachers.
For sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's an organization, it's a lineage, non-chaotic, you
Yeah.
know, in the sense of they just don't give you the materials and say, you know, go at it. You have to learn a methodology almost to the point where it's, you know, it's second nature,
Yeah.
and then get rid of it. You like
Right.
sort of get the secret message from Mission Impossible,
Yeah.
and then it blows up,
Yeah.
and then you have to then jump off.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about it a lot in terms of, I always go back to sports analogies, but it's the mechanics of shooting a basketball.
Yes.
It's the mechanics of, it's the rhythm of getting at the free throw line and having the same sort of routine. And once you develop a feel for it, once the mechanics become second nature, then you don't have to think about it anymore, and you can play the fluidity of the game.
Absolutely.
But the mechanics aren't the game. They're just the thing that makes the game fluid.
Absolutely, 100%. So, okay, so yeah, so Steve and Gary studied with Leslie Posey. So the lineage that, you know, that is here at Lyme now is Leslie Posey studied with Palaschik, and Palaschik was a Gratefully student. So Charles Gratefully, one of the, you know, considered like the father of American sculpture, had studied with Akins and Bouguereau and Chaput and all these instructors, either within the States or in Paris, and came back to the Pennsylvania Academy, and then had these great students,
Yeah.
which created this awesome lineage. So everything that's taught here is based on my instructors, and for me, it's really Gary and Steve are like my guys.
Yeah.
I followed Steve to Harlem to study at Janus, and that was sort of like
Yeah.
the icing on the cake, having Michael Grimaldi, Dan Thompson,
Yeah.
and Kate Lehman. Meanwhile, I'm still going up to Gary's, just learning foundry as well.
Yeah.
Because Gary is, besides his incredible clays, he's actually casting all of his own bronzes himself in his own personal foundry.
That's amazing. That's a whole nother level of expertise.
It's insane.
Yeah.
So, and it's something that he brought to the Pennsylvania Academy, which was the foundry. Like,
Yeah.
so I eventually moved up to upstate New York, and sort of just living and working with Gary, and then went back after that finished. Went back to Philadelphia, married. We had children. Moved towards Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Opened up my own foundry. Still staying in touch with Gary. Started teaching at a few different schools.
You sort of glazed over, opened up my own foundry,
Yeah.
like that was nothing.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
There's a lot involved with that. I used to share a studio with a sculptor, and there was a foundry next door that he owned, and
Okay.
there's a lot going on with that. That's a big undertaking.
It was. It was. Yeah, I partnered up with my dad. You know, he had the art background, construction background, so we decided to do this. And then my wife Denise, so my dad's Fran, my wife Denise, and I, the three of us sort of, you know, start this foundry. So start taking on commission work, and at the same time would have, you know, students from different areas come by, you know, help out, things of that nature. Started running workshops at Studio Incaminati, did a couple of Grand Central. It was just great, you know.
Yeah.
And then while doing that, I was earning my MFA at the Maryland Institute College of Art.
Wow.
So
That's amazing. I mean, that's so much education. You're talking about it's the experiences and the people that you're naming. It's like you're talking about 5 different people's education that you crammed into your life. That's so much.
yeah, it was a lot. I studied for a long time. I figured it would be my job to have the best understanding possible of what was being taught in Paris, because I find that 19th century Parisian academic approach, the easiest for us to reach to
Yeah.
in regards of at the actual lineage of actually being
Sure.
taught. My favorite work to look at are late Renaissance mannerists, so anything from Michelangelo to Pontormo
Yeah.
to Salviati. I just love that work. I
Yeah.
love the fluidity. But in regards of like authentic information, if I was going to take this on, like where I've dabbled within like martial arts, like
Yeah.
you really want the essence of the information.
Yeah.
You don't want some, get a new colored belt and break a board.
Yeah,
You actually want the real stuff. You want
Yeah.
the meat. And
Yeah, it's a joke of my wife and I that like every time you see an abandoned Blockbuster, it turns into a new karate dojo, right? That's sort of like art schools as well. It's
Yeah.
just they pop up everywhere, but getting really solid information is not as easy.
yes. So to backtrack, while I'm with Gary, I hear of this couple who had visited Gary along with a sculptor, and the couple was Amaya and Jordan. And Gary just said how incredible they were, and Iran was the sculptor they were with, Weber.
Yeah.
Then if we fast forward, I received an email from Jordan probably about 2 years ago to see if I was interested in about adding a sculpture to Lime Academy.
Yeah.
And I was beyond thrilled to be, asked and honored. So I thought, wow. I had reached out to Gary then, because Gary was also putting a piece here. And we talked about like what was happening here. And it was a really awesome conversation.
Yeah.
So I decided to reach out to Jordan and just say, "Hey, I would love to see what you're doing. Can I swing by?"
Yeah.
He was completely open for the visit and came by, and we talked. And within like 2 minutes, I was just blown away.
Yeah,
I was just
yeah.
blown away of like how they're approaching this.
Yeah.
Through the values were just so awesome
Yeah.
that I actually called my wife after meeting Jordan. I said, "This is really going to be special.
Yeah.
This is really going to be special." So we had
And
cars.
at that point, you hadn't even seen the campus,
I saw the campus.
Oh, okay.
I saw the campus.
because that's a huge deal as well. I mean, the resources that they have here makes a big difference when you're trying to teach. Having the lighting and the space and the resources of all the casts, and I think they got a ton of bronzes.
Yes.
And yeah.
It is nice. It is. The resources are great, but I had, with all these schools that I had attended,
Yeah.
leadership was number one.
Oh yeah, sure.
So who's steering the ship?
Yeah.
And after speaking with Amaya and Jordan, it was like, this is going to be awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're really bringing something, back, or rebuilding something,
Yeah.
or making something quite new that we haven't seen in a while.
Yeah.
So, meanwhile, COVID happens, and things, the world is sort of really changing, and Denise, my wife, and I decided that we were going to move for many reasons from the central PA. And eventually we decided that Lime was a possible landing spot. So I had submitted an application for the position here.
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to be a part of this community,
Yeah.
and was fortunate that it worked out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's interesting. That was one of my main questions when looking forward to talking to you, was to go from professional sculptor, doing significant public sculptures, which you've done, and owning a foundry, and then to go to a teaching position directorial position in a program, it's a pretty big shift in daily focus. And so I was curious, but your experience with education and the way you talk about it and the importance you put on your own education, it makes a lot of sense that would be appealing to you to pass that on and continue the tradition that you were a part of.
Yes. I was always going to teach. I just wanted to make sure that I felt that I had enough to give. And, I think it's necessary if you're going to teach that you should actually, everyone here at Lime who's an instructor is a working artist.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to try to train or to teach, students about being a working artist if you're not actually working as an artist.
I 100% agree.
So
yeah.
You actually have to go out there and feel that, whether it's commission work or gallery work, because there's a lot of lessons to be learned.
Yeah.
And there's many more to be learned. But, having worked as a working artist for 10 years, I felt like, I think there's enough there besides, all the great principles and teachings and methods that, Gary and Steve had passed along was, and many more, from others. I thought there was enough lessons from actually being a working artist that, I feel confident that I can share a good deal.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I recognized when I was running my school was that a lot of the academies, they were void of the conversation of composition or narrative or design or art making. It was so focused on craft and method and technical ability. And when I was at the Florence Academy, it was even said, all we can do is correct your drawing. And the moment you say, well, I like it better this way, your education here is finished. And so they were specifically saying design isn't a part of this. And I feel like when you have working professionals that can also bring in the idea that design, that the focus, I guess, on the post-graduation application of the skills. When you can infuse that into the daily conversation, that yes, the skills are important, we need to build that foundation, but why are you developing the skills? Really focusing on what are you going to do with them afterwards, and that's towards art making. I think, the way Jordan and Amaya are doing it in their own work, and just what I see in the student work already, even in the first year and a half, it feels very much like they're instilling that in the students early on, that there is something after this.
For sure.
And I think that to me is what makes what's happening here so exciting. Is it feels like the next evolution of the academic tradition, right? The academic tradition being, kind of coming back a little bit in 1995, 2000, and growing since then. But this feels like something slightly new and exciting in terms of it being more artistically driven.
Yes, it is, and with that, it's. I don't think you're going to see, you're not going to see copies of copies here.
Yeah.
You'll actually be able to identify whose work is whose here, because they're offering so many tools.
Yeah.
And when you give students so many tools, the immediate, what I'll joke around here is they're within the sculpture department is we're not going to make refrigerator art, which is something that you did that makes you feel special, that you can put up on your refrigerator. Yeah. That's not what we're doing here. What we're going to do is we're going to get really, really, really good at the fundamentals.
Yeah.
And the fundamentals build the house.
Right.
So it's really hard to put the curtains up on the final forms and polish everything so it's nice and pretty when the house is sort of falling over.
Right.
There's no structure.
Yeah.
So with that is when you offer all these tools to students and they're not basing their entire education on mimesis, like blindly copying,
Right.
then you can actually, begin to watch them let go.
Yeah.
And the letting go is the big one.
Yeah.
Is that like you reach a point where you have spent so much time through repetition that that has become second nature, and then you are consciously or ideally subconsciously making choices.
Yeah.
I emailed Ted Seth Jacobs as I was finishing up my education, and I never met him.
Yeah.
But I always, I loved his books, and he was always wonderful just to write to. So I wrote him and I asked him, when is a student done studying? Because I don't know when that is.
Yeah.
And similar to your point, which was when you begin to see the figure in a different way than how your instructors have, and you can see the figure that way, but you're choosing to see the figure in another way,
Yeah.
then it's time to stop studying.
Yeah.
Which is that you have a form vocabulary, or you have a visual vocabulary, and you can switch with ease, and you have such range.
Yeah.
I mean, giving students range is wonderful,
Right.
especially going into, a commission world where you can play different games with,
Yeah.
your form selections, your atmospheric approach, whether it's clay or, 3-dimensional or 2-dimension.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's happening here, and it is wonderful to see. I mean, it's
Yeah.
remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, the best thing you can hope to do as a teacher is help a student unlock their greatest potential towards their specific goals, which are unique to each student.
For sure.
So the foundations kind of apply broadly.
Right.
The information early on can be broadly presented, but the further you go in your education, the more specific it needs to become, because your needs, the individual needs of the students start to diverge a little bit as they find a greater, more personal vision. And it seems like the approach, again, we have a year and a half to see the product of how this information is being presented, but even in that year and a half, it feels to me, looking at the student work, like that's being done. And that is just, for me, it's so exciting. Because again, I think I haven't seen that being done in a lot of the academies that have existed, from the Florence Academy, GCA, whatever. That individuality wasn't as present as I feel like it is here already.
I love what Amaya and Jordan are doing.
Yeah.
I really do. And, you have this incredible team here. You have Hollis, you have Eddie, you have Rick, there's just like this incredible team of instructors here. And it's a tight-knit group as well. So there's conversations going back and forth, different, having studied at quite a number of schools, you can feel it.
Yeah.
You can just feel it. And the student body feels like a family. It's everybody sort of, there's a buzz here, and the energy, keeps everything rolling. There's like a momentum, and it just goes and goes, I was telling you earlier that, the students were here at 6 a.m. this morning sculpting, so
that's
it's a hardcore
dedication,
group.
man.
Yeah, and then, and they'll go through the course of the day, just drawing till 9. It's remarkable. But it, through the repetitions, it's sort of, all flowers bloom at different time periods.
Sure.
But it does expedite the process of, of your hours. I
Yeah.
do believe in Malcolm Gladwell's, 10,000 hour
Yeah.
rule, so they are accumulating their, sincere hours
Yeah.
here. And it's,
Well, I read a book you might be interested in. It's called Peak: Secrets to the New Science of Expertise. And it expands on Malcolm Gladwell's. I think Malcolm Gladwell got the 10,000 hour rule from these guys.
Okay.
And so they expanded the idea of that. And basically the idea is that that a human progression or human development in anything, to become an expert at anything, whether it's memorizing numbers or playing violin or sculpture, whatever, it relies on 3 pillars. And the first is the 10,000 hour rule, which is, that's a minimum to become an expert at anything. But the second pillar is that the 10,000 hours is spent on deliberate practice, which means learning the scales on the piano before you learn Beethoven. This really regimented, progressional approach to the development of that skill. And then third is that the deliberate practice is watched over and corrected by somebody who has already mastered that skill. And so in the art world specifically, the reason I say that is because in the art world specifically, I've heard so many times that you just have to spend 10,000 hours drawing. And if you do that, really what you can, on your own, really what you can do is just get really efficient at mediocre drawing. You get faster at it, but you don't necessarily get better. What did Degas say? He said, the problem with being self-taught is that you have the most ignorant teacher, right? But when you spend those hours in an environment like this, where you're consistent, where it's organized, and you're practicing deliberately, and being watched over and corrected all the time, that those 10,000 hours become far more efficient. Like you said, flowers bloom in different seasons, and everybody has their own sort of pace that they're going to learn and come to this knowledge, but it can become so much more efficient when you have a great system and environment and teachers that are correcting you along the way.
For sure. And then how they correct is a whole other thing, which is not making you feel inadequate.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Because I've seen that.
Sure.
And that's insane.
Yeah.
Of like, it's really like, suggestions, great, do it again. Suggestions, great, do it again.
Yeah.
Like you just keep repeating
Yeah.
without being overcritical.
Yeah.
And because the overcritical stuff is, we're all still learning.
Yeah.
So I love that part about it, because otherwise it can be you're not really fostering a good relationship.
Yeah.
Then you're sort of creating this like dictatorial space, and that doesn't really work.
Yeah, and those environments always seem to be governed by people that have a certain overrated sense of power or authority. But when you really care about a student, the criticism is meant to help them see something that maybe they're struggling with, or help them develop something, because what you really care about is their success.
Sure.
And so critical review is always positive, and you understand that there are no failures when sincere attempts are made. That failure is true failure is either not trying or giving up. Right? So anything a student is doing, if they're really trying, is positive.
For sure.
And great teachers understand that, and tearing somebody down, they always hear in the art schools, a teacher came and tore somebody's drawing up or something.
Right.
Just ridiculous stories about teaching methods that are useless.
Right.
And the goal as a teacher should always be what's best for the student. And
sure.
I think that I've only dipped in here a couple of times, but I feel it immediately. I experienced it to some degree in Florence, but when I walk through here, it's immediately apparent that there's that familial environment where everybody really appreciates each other, and everybody's just excited to get better. And
Yeah.
that's a top-down thing for sure.
It is. It is. It comes back to leadership.
Yeah.
It just comes back to who's steering the boat.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love being on the team.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. So what's next? I mean, you've got a class coming up, so I don't want to take too much of your time. But so I saw you did a sculpture of Dr. J.
I did.
Is that right? I
Yeah.
played a pickup game
Oh, okay.
with Dr. J. Living legend. It's unbelievable. So you've done the public sort of monument things, and now you're teaching here, which I'm sure takes up a lot of your time. But professionally, outside of that, what are you working on, and what's next?
I'm will still be a working artist.
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is great. And that's something that Jordan and Amaya, encourage,
Sure.
which is just wonderful as well.
Yeah.
So in October, the sculpture program launches.
Okay.
So right now we're taking applications and
Okay.
really solidifying that foundation.
So that will be students coming in that will spend the majority of their day in sculpture
And drawing.
and drawing. So you've got the drawing, painting side of things, and you'll have the sculpture side. And how much overlap? Will there be?
A decent amount. A
Okay.
decent amount. So the drawing instructors that are already present will be teaching the sculpture students as well as the painting students. And Eddie Rachat, who oversees the anatomy, will be teaching both the painting and the drawing. So quite a bit of overlap.
Yeah.
Which I think is great.
Yeah.
It creates good conversations.
And the drawing and painting students will also be able to do some sculpture as well, right?
Yes, they are taking foundational sculptures with sculpting the figure.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
It's
there's
such a hugely important thing, being able to visualize things three-dimensionally and have that experience as a painter is really helpful.
I think it's both. I think even for the sculpture students, it's important for them to really be students of the arts. That doesn't mean you have to, spend enormous time, painting at the easel, but you should be, fluent of like what are painters doing, and have a visual literacy when you go through a museum, and not only for sculpture but also for painting. To have an intelligent conversation about what exactly is going on there. The art history. Emily Weeks, who oversees the art history here, is absolutely incredible. So the sculpture students will also be participating in those classes as well. So it's going to be pretty seamless. The only difference is just there's going to be, I want them to have clay in their hands quite a bit.
Yeah.
To gain that fluency with the material and the 3D. So there's that. I do have some public work due this summer as well. I do have public work due next summer, and really jump back into a little bit of the gallery work again. So, but yeah, it's building this program. We have some really exciting upcoming events, bringing in guest lecturers or visiting artists. We have 15 sculptors visiting Lyme in 3 weeks.
Wow.
So they're all just coming here, and I'll sort of build the family out.
Yeah.
So Kate Brockman, Gary Weissman, Alicia Ponzio, I'm sure you know.
Oh, yeah.
Alicia will be teaching a workshop here this summer.
Great.
Steve Perkins is coming up from Florida. So Bob Simon from the New York Academy, Heather Persett from GCA, just trying to build out the community. It doesn't have to be they're there, we're here. Just sort of create that family community.
I think that's amazing. I know I had a school in Springville, Utah, which is kind of a small town, and there was always that concern about having gone to Florence. I knew what it was like to be in a big city. Well, Florence isn't a huge city, but to be in a city with you know, a lot of energy and history and architecture and resources in terms of great museums. And so I know a lot of students, when they're looking at where to study, Florence is obviously, the city itself is going to be a huge draw. New York is a huge draw because of the resources. And sometimes students can look at you know, a smaller town like Old Lyme and say, well, you know, I don't know if I you know, want to be that far from those resources. I'd rather maybe be in a big city. But I think what the benefit of here is that the cost of living obviously is a lot lower. So as a young arts student, that makes it more accessible financially. But also, it's 2 hours from New York, 2 hours from Boston. You have those resources of the great museums at your fingertips, and what you're doing in terms of bringing in those wider communities of people. And exposing students to such a high level variety of various teachers is everything you could want in a school. I mean, if I have two previous students that are studying here now, and you know that when they're looking at what to do next, I'm like, you have to go to Lyme.
Yeah.
There's I don't know another school. I think you know, I get asked quite a bit because I did run a school, where should I study and what are your recommendations? And you know, when Jordan and Amaya you know, came here, because I was good friends with Jordan in Florence, and then I met Amaya at the Hudson River Landscape Fellowship, and so I knew who they were. I knew the quality of artists that they were. So when they got hired here, immediately I was like, okay, let's see what's going to happen, because I think it could be special. And then immediately it was. So my recommendation always at this point is number one, Lyme Academy. If you can, I think it's immediately my top recommendation for where people should study. Sounds like you agree.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. Yeah.
And it's important because you have such a wide variety of educational experience. So it's not just because you're involved that you would agree with that. It's because you've seen a lot of different teaching styles and environments, and this is special. This is different.
It is. It is special. And it's supportive, and it's there's an energy here. There is, like, you know, you just have to feel it.
Yeah.
You know, some things are soiled by words. You know, you just have to feel it, and yeah, it's exciting, very exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I know you've got class and you've probably got to prepare for that. So
Yes.
maybe we could just wrap it up there.
Well, yes. Thank you very much for the conversation.
Yeah, it was great to meet you, and I'm excited. I'm excited for what's going on here. My wife and I are out here specifically to, you know, look at areas to move with our family. And one of the draws for me is, of course, New York and Boston and the museums, but it's being near something like this and just having the opportunity to come to like lectures as an artist and you know, be around the energy of excited young students and to be able to associate with a lot of the artists involved in this is just as a peripheral like observer is exciting to me.
It really is. You know, it's remarkable what they're doing. I mean, you know, just over the past few months, I mean, the artists that have walked through here, I mean, not only do you have Jordan and Amaya teaching here, and Hollis and Eddie and Rick, but Stephen Assail's been here, and Michael Grimaldi's been here, and John DeMartin was here, and Dan Thompson's been here. Like, it's just ongoing. It's like, oh my gosh, you know, it's and it starts at the top. It really does.
Yeah,
it starts at the top. It is amazing to be here. I feel just very fortunate and happy to be on the team, and I love being here.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, for any of those who are thinking about where to go,
It's easy.
It's an easy choice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks. Thank you
Thank-
very much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Cool.
That was fun, brother.
Yeah. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, for sure.